Tasha L. Harrison is a romance author and creator of the 20K in 5 Days Writing Challenge. From that challenge, a wider community was sparked, and Tasha now hosts the Wordmakers Writing Community, where writers come together to do the writing work. She recently co-edited the current anthology, Volumes 1 and 2, which is 12 brand new stories from Black romance authors to support the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. You can find links for everything Tasha does in the show notes or description, depending on where you're watching or listening to this. I hope you enjoy this conversation about marketing and business as a fiction writer and finding your own way of doing things in an industry where there are set structures. Whether that's the same kind of business you have or very completely different, I hope you can be inspired by Tasha's story, the way that she approaches things, and also how she looks at things like growth for her business. Welcome to the podcast, Tasha. It's so good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to chat about everything. So to kick us off, though, tell the audience who you are and what you do.
My name is Tasha L. Harrison. I am a romance author, freelance editor, and host of a community called Wordmakers, which is a writing community on Mighty Networks.
All of the things. I love it.
Too many things.
Yeah, we'll get to that. First off, I kind of wanted to start out with the start, like the origin. So with when you first started your business, you were working in healthcare, but freelancing on the side with like a side hustle. And I feel like that looks different to everyone. So what did that actually look like? Like what services were you offering?
I was basically working two full-time jobs. I was editing pretty much full-time. I was taking like 2 jobs a month, which I do developmental editing. So that's like big picture, deep editing, like character development and all that kind of stuff. So very mentally taxing. And so I was doing 2 of those a month. And sometimes I was doing like just like regular critiques alongside it, making decent money, like really good money. And I hated my job. Okay, let's rewind. I didn't hate my job. I liked my job. I worked in elderly healthcare. So I loved working with old people. They're amazing. They always have the best stories. Love talking to them. I just hated my coworkers. Did not like my coworkers. It was difficult to come to work every day to have to deal with them. And that never really improved. So I had to have surgery in August of 2019, I think. And I was out for 6 weeks. And when I came back, I was like, oh no, I can't do this job anymore. I was like, there's nothing here. Like I have nothing left for these people that I work with. And it just got really difficult. And then like after Thanksgiving, they were like, we need you to switch to night shift. And I was like, oh no, not doing that. I was going to wait a year. Like I was saving my money so I could have my little cushion or whatever. And I was like, okay, after a year, I'll just quit. And I didn't even make it like 6 months. It like they came to me to work night shift, and I was like, no, can't do it. And I knew that all the editing work I was doing was going to catch me because I was turning away clients at that point because I just didn't have enough hours in the day with working the day job to also edit as much as like as much interest as I was getting. And then I quit, and immediately the world shut down. So that was interesting. Couldn't have planned for that. And edited for another year and a half, and then ended up quitting editing for a while just because it became too much for lots of reasons. But, how can I say this nicely? Anybody can write a book, and that's great. But anybody can write a book. So I found myself doing a lot more teaching than I was, just basically editing what was on the page, like teaching authors how to write a book. And that was not necessarily what I wanted to do. And I found myself getting frustrated with that process. Also, I just wanted to write more. So I quit editing, and then I wrote like 6 books.
Yeah, you really didn't hold back on that one.
Yeah. It's like, I quit editing tomorrow. I'm publishing a book.
Well, I mean, that's amazing that you then turned it around and very quickly was able to do those books, because I think sometimes, and maybe you were burnt out, but sometimes like you go to do the thing that you really want to do and that lights you up and you're too exhausted to do it.
Yeah, that was definitely it.
So it takes longer than you thought, or like you just didn't know how long things are going to take or how hard things are going to take, and so they take longer than you thought. um but that's it's it's so exciting to hear that you had that cushion when they came to you
Mhm.
about night shift, because night shift is a whole other level of exhausting. And so then it's like, how am I going to fit this in while also trying to sleep during the day and do all of the things? And no, thank you.
It just wouldn't have been possible. It wouldn't have been
I don't know how
possible.
people do it.
I worked nights one time, like early into my nursing career, and that was when my husband was home more, and I was like, "That's this. This is just. I can't do this. I can't function because it's not as if I can come home and go to sleep. Like I had kids, I had a house to run. Like so, I was like, no, I can't do that again.
Yeah, I swear half the, like, I mean, I don't have kids, but I swear half the way that parenting is able to happen is because they're in school. So, and like at the same time that you're at work. So
Yes,
otherwise, how does that function? I don't understand.
it
Yeah, I
doesn't.
hear of my grandmother was a nurse and she did like the afternoon shift, I think. So it was kind of like she'd head to work before my dad and his siblings would get home from school, but then she would get home at like 8 p.m. And like even that sounds hard. And like,
Yeah.
um this is also obviously a different generation. So my dad and his sisters would come home from school and there wouldn't be anyone home, which is very different to my childhood. But like it's just like how would you do that? And so I can see how if you had decided to go, well, I decided I was going to do a year,
Hmm.
so I'm going to stick it out for another 6 months, that things would be very different. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you stuck your guns.
And I'm glad I quit when I did because COVID. Um,
Yeah, that too. I
and
I could not do healthcare. I am uh happy that you did it at that long.
like I don't mean any harm, but like when I heard about how my coworkers were existing inside this like long-term care facility during COVID, like it just sounded hellish. And
Yeah,
I don't have the spirit to deal with that kind of stuff. Like I probably would have broke mentally from doing that.
I don't even think I have the spirit for healthcare without a pandemic. So, um,
It's not. I mean, it's, like it's hard to say. Like some people are like, well, how, don't you miss it? Don't you miss taking care of people? I was like, yeah, that's the good part. But then, like, you lose patience, and then there's some days that you're just dealing with nothing but bodily fluids, and like, it's a roller coaster of emotions.
yeah, exactly. And you could help people with your books. I
Exactly.
mean, people need some level of escapism. It's great. Um, cool. And so, with the editing, tell me more about. So you weren't doing that for a certain amount of time, but then you've recently co-edited a project. So tell me about that.
Yes. Yes. Last year during the time when Jackson, Mississippi was having like all those issues with water, which they still are having. They still don't have water in half of the city. Um, One of my friends who she is a historian and she works as a professor, and she just like woke up and was like, "We're gonna do something about this." I was like, "We?" And she was like, "Yeah." She was like, "We're gonna pull together this an anthology or whatever." And I was like, "When do you want to publish it?" She was like next month. I was like, "Ma'am."
Oh.
I was like, "Ma'am, this is not going to work." I was like, "We need at least 2 months." So we just got in the inboxes of the authors that we liked and was like, "Hey, we know this is short notice. Can you give us something? Like, if possible, it could be. Please make it original, not something that's like from that you've already published before." And surprisingly, everybody said yes, and it's I mean, like we're still pulling in a good amount of money, like $200 to $300 a month for that anthology, and it's like one of the things I'm most proud of. I was like, when we were doing it, I was like, oh, I'm never going to do that again. That was horrible because it was so stressful. But then immediately afterwards, I was like, so what are we doing our next one? But yeah, it was different to be on the side where basically on the side of a publisher, like deciding which stories fit together best, and getting to the point where we're like, this is going to be way too long, like we have to have 2 volumes, and deciding how we would split it up. And an unintentional like we didn't tell them that there was going to be a theme, but there ended up being like a theme of diversity and themes about water that just kind of tied through all the stories, which was really great. Um, yeah, it was fun. It was a fun thing to do. And now I think I might want to do it again. I've run some in our community. Like we've had a couple of like little small anthologies in the community that I haven't edited, but I've helped edit. And so I was like, maybe we can do this once a year, have like a word makers anthology.
Oh yeah. Well, that's cool then, because I can see how, because within your community, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, is that you know because of the collaborative like being in a community, you learn stuff about people like not quite through osmosis, but like you learn from other people how to write better and how to
Hmm.
create characters better and all of these things because you hear other people asking questions or talking about their own character development, and so hopefully what that means is that there's less of the teaching that happens when you're doing the editing.
Yes, yes, yes. And basically, like my services are not open to anyone outside of the community right now. Like I'm only working within the community, and because they know they've been with me for 3 is it 4 years now? I don't know. I don't know. I just be working. Um, and so they know my style. Like they're not, some people just like you to talk to them nice all the time, and sometimes nice is not what's going to get it. Like sometimes you have to be like, friend, this is not a book, and that's as nice as I can do it.
Yeah, I think sometimes we are taught that being straightforward isn't kind
Hmm.
and that that is somehow rude. But what you're actually doing, I mean, it shouldn't be doing them a favor, but like that's essentially what it is you are giving them the piece of information that they really need. Um and so I find like in coaching is that I have to when I'm giving someone a strategy and I need to give them negative feedback, it's like, well, they need the feedback.
Right.
I just need to see how I can give it in the best way that it can actually be received so that they don't like put a wall up or whatever. But just by telling them that they need to do something or they said they were going to do something and they haven't done it, and raising that with them isn't being rude or mean or whatever. It's
Yeah.
just the actual situation, and sometimes people need a mirror held up for them.
And sometimes like that, like the nice and kind thing is always where I go back. Like I'll tell them, I was like, you're never gonna catch me being nice. I don't believe in nice. Nice has no value. Nice doesn't, have any teeth. Kindness has teeth. Kindness might have a little bit of an edge to it. But in the end, if I'm being kind to you, it's because I am doing it because I care about you and I want you to better
Mhm.
yourself. If I would just was gonna be nice to you, I can be nice to anybody, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I can be nice to a stranger and not even
Hmm.
remember them tomorrow, so I'd rather be kind and really help you. Yeah, no, that's perfect. um so let's talk about self-published fiction author things.
Okay.
How does it all work and how do you approach it as like okay, maybe let's start off with my understanding of how like a I guess you would call it like a traditionally published, is that what we
Okay.
would call it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a traditionally published person has like an agent or whatever who sells them to a publisher. The publisher
Hmm.
hires them to write the book, gives them the advance, and then I think maybe what an outsider would assume is that the publisher takes care of the distribution for the stores. They pay to print the book, and also they pay for all that marketing and PR that gets done. And yeah, what I'm learning is that no, they basically just have the distribution,
Distribution
and
is it.
basically the advance that they are giving you is based on the fact that they think you're going to sell lots of items that they can sell into a store. um and there's a certain amount of risk involved for them, and so therefore they only do um realistically like people who have possibly like written a book before or have some other history, or that's why we see so many nonfiction
Hmm.
who like they've written a book now but
Millions of
they also
dollars.
yeah like they already had a very established, like maybe they were already a public speaker or something, and so
Hmm.
self-publishing to me always was like, oh well, I'm missing out on that piece of distribution, but also the marketing. They're going to pay for the marketing, but what I'm learning is like they don't maybe not do that for you anyway. And so then because they are giving you the advance, they then have some control over what you write and what you write about and the genre and what the book cover looks like and how it gets promoted, and yet they won't actually do it for you.
No.
So then you have to do it as the self-publishing person, well, as the actually traditional publishing person.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're self-publishing or not, you still have to do all of the PR and the marketing and everything yourself. Um, so let me know if any of that was incorrect.
No, you're spot on. For the most part, traditional publishing, it used to be that you could expect them to do some marketing.
Mhm.
Now it's pretty much like they want you to come to them with an audience already. Twitter, TikTok, something. They want you to be able to, they want you to know who your reader is, even though you've
Mhm.
never written a book. They want you to know who your reader is, how to find them, where to find them, how to sell to them. None of this is your job. You just wrote a book. But you have to know all this stuff when you show up. And then they're going to send you to Canva and tell you to create your own images and tell you how, like, here is a TikTok tutorial. This is how you do this. And you need to get on the TikTokies. Um, like literally, that's if they even send you a link to a tutorial. But like most of the time,
Mm.
they'll be like, oh, well, people are having great success on TikTok. Maybe you should get on TikTok. And you're like, I don't do social media.
I am a writer.
I am a writer. I came here to write. Um, and I think that too, like you really did hit on a point that that's really the big picture of it is coming together now. Like so many of the publishers are like they're forming like Voltron. They're all just buying each other out and they're coming together and coming together. And it's like a million imprints of like US publishers. It used to be the Big 10, then it was the Big 5. Now I think we're down to 4, maybe.
Wow. So really it's just all the same places. It's like medical, where you think everything's coming from different places and
But
really
it's
it's all the
really
same
just
places. It's like the
mhm.
beauty aisle at the supermarket. It's all
Yes,
actually 4
yes.
companies.
It's all Johnson and Johnson. Pretty much that's where we are. And like now that the tables have turned, no one is really doing the diversity initiatives. Like all of the non-white editors and agents that they hired, they're all getting fired now. All of the books that they acquired now suddenly are unable to be published because of XYZ element of P. We don't really have any answers. Um, so it's really going back to what kind of books can we sell to businesses, and that has literally been the thing from the beginning. Publishers do not care what readers want, and I know that sounds crazy to say it. They do not care what readers want. They just care about what they can sell to big box stores like Walmart, Costco, Barnes and Noble. They just care about that. Um, and if it doesn't have the right cover or it doesn't read like something else that sold well in their catalog, they're just not interested in it. And it has really kind of flattened what people consider fiction. And like when it comes to romantic fiction, which is crazy, like I've been here for like too long, 13 years writing romance. And it's kind of like it used to be we had a little bit more wiggle room now. And now it's like, no, we have to write it to this formula. Like everybody has to write to this formula, not just this particular imprint who wants, only billionaire romances with, the hero looking like this and the heroine looking like that. But now it's kind of like, okay, we want a 3 act structure, by 60% there should be some steam on the page, and like just basically a formula for it. And it never used to be that strident. And I think that like people love this whole thing. It's like you can get your book really popular by getting a following on TikTok. But two things are happening here. It's like a lot of these self-publishers do not have any uh, foundation in like what true storytelling, like learned how to tell a story. Like they know how to tell a story, but they don't know the mechanics of it. So they're writing books like other books that they've read. And then all these people are reading books that are just like the other books that the other people read. And now everything is exactly the same, and everybody wants the same thing over and over again. And anyone who kind of breaks out a little bit, it's like, okay, but why should we like this? Why should we pay any attention to it? And it just makes it hard for visibility. That, and also 1.7 million books get published a year.
Ooh, wow. The thing that comes to mind when you talk about that formula is that they have created it in such a way that something like AI or like quite a poorly written book, if it fits the formula, it's like it still ticks the boxes and it still gets published.
And they are very, very scared of AI. Like the whole AI conversation in the romance community has been at feverish levels because they're like, oh no, like we're gonna lose our jobs. And I'm like, girlfriend, if you're not writing something that AI can regurgitate, you have nothing to worry about. You have nothing to worry about. Your readers are not the readers who are going to read an AI romance. Like, is it going to make it difficult for a while? Yeah. But, eventually everything's going to settle out because people are going to get tired of reading the same bland crap over and over again.
Yeah, and like, oh, I'm on page 200. Guess I'm going to find out who the second suspect is or whatever. And it's like, you get to a point where, like, there are shows like, say, like SVU, where the reason that people think of SVU as like a comfort show is not because of the actual subject matter. It's because there is a rhythm to it. So, like,
Yes.
by the second ad break, whatever. I remember watching shows when I was in high school. And of course, this is at the point where it's not on demand anymore. So it's like, it's 9:15. And like, if it's 8:40 p.m., which means we're 10 minutes into the TV show, and we think we've found the suspect, well, then obviously we haven't actually found the
No,
person
that's a red
because
herring.
we've still got way too much of the show to go,
Yeah.
and it just becomes too obvious. But you get to a point, I mean, when you're reading a lot of books, that's as a reader, that's not going to be particularly interesting because, yes, you like your things, but like, well, yeah, I guess there is to that comfort piece.
I think there's well, I'm naming two groups, but there is a group of readers who do enjoy the SVU comfort read. I want to know exactly what's happening. Those are kind of the people who came up reading Harlequin Presents, or like the historical romances with Fabio on them. Like they all have the same kind of formula, and those people enjoy the books that have like the same formula. And then you have a romance readers, like they may not recognize the formula, like they want you to hide it. This is like the formula is there, but they want you to hide it. And like they have some expectations, but not nearly as many expectations as the person who reads like the old school formulaic romance. And then you have the other people who are kind of a hybrid of the same thing. It's like, I want you to hide the formula. Like, I don't want to see it, but I also want to know by page 60, this will happen. I'm like, I don't know what you're asking for here.
Yeah.
I don't know how to satisfy this. But yeah, I think it's just like a kind of almost like a deterioration in how people are reading what's happening on the page and just kind of wanting like a box to put it in. And if it's not in that box, and they're just kind of like, oh, well, this is not a romance. I've heard that several times about things that have come out in the last 2 years. I'm like, this is not a romance. I'm like, this is actually a romance. Like, just because it didn't happen in the sequence that you're used to, or like in the time frame that you're used to, it's still a romance. It's just not one that has a formula that you like.
Yeah. So when it comes to marketing the books, is it, because you have obviously more than one book now, is it more of a holistic brand, you as a romance author, or is it more like book by book? You're promoting like the premise or the hook or the.
It depends. Some of my books are more tropey than others. Like they lean heavier on like enemies to lovers or whatever. And then I have some that are kind of like more like women's fiction, but with strong romantic elements. And those are actually harder sells for me because I can never figure out like what makes somebody read this. And I'll try to lean on tropes, and then people will be like, well, this is not your typical cop romance. I'm like, good. Because that's not what I wrote. But yeah, I think over time it's become people coming to me because of me as the author. Like they're coming for my voice and not necessarily the book I write. But for new to me readers, like it's generally like, oh, I like this trope. You have this trope. Someone told me about this book that you wrote that has this trope. That sort of thing. So it's like a romance version of SEO.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Mhm.
So how much of your marketing time is that you doing like marketing versus like looking at those tropes or figuring out what you can put in it because of that word of mouth piece?
Mm, I very rarely ever write to trope. I just write the book and then figure out the tropes afterwards. And then how much time spent creating marketing materials? Like a lot now, a lot, because for the last decade or so, everybody was leaning very heavily on social media. Like social media was the way that you were promoting and marketing your work. It was really just promo because we weren't paying for ads or anything. We were just blasting our timeline with like pretty pictures and links. That's it. And now the algorithm has gotten like so impossible to be seen. I've gone back old school. Like I'm creating long form content to drive more organic traffic just from regular searches. And let me tell you, that's still hard too. Like that's harder than it was before. Like it used to be like you could throw up a couple of posts a month and people who read your blog or whatever, they would share it and it would circulate a little bit. Now it's like, wow, like the little hill is not going up as quickly as I would like. There's lots of peaks and valleys. And I have to think a lot more about SEO, like on the page than I used to before. Like I'm framing all of my posts in such a way that it's targeting people who want to read a book about this topic that is in this particular article, which is fun in its own way. It's kind of a different sort of creativity, but my God, it's so much work. Like this is a whole nother job.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
It's your
full-time
job.
job just doing the
It's a
thing.
full-time job.
And then, yeah. And then, well, then there's also the piece of like, before we were talking about like some people have had success on TikTok. Well, most of the book content that I see, or at least like the stories that you hear about books going viral on TikTok, it's not from the author's content. It's because some book blogger
Mhm.
posted about it and therefore it picked off. Like
It's all
there's
luck.
actually, yeah, there's one author that I know of who I believe was traditionally published and I believe now has sold like the movie rights. So therefore you never know how much of this was like strategic. But it was something like they were like making content completely unrelated to the books, but like of her husband making comments about the movies they were watching. I can't even remember what her name was, which means
I
that
feel
it's
like this
probably
is
not good marketing for her books. But it was like, and then occasionally they'd just mention that she was an author, kind of a thing of like,
what?
but it's like, who does that on purpose? Like, unless
No.
it's like one of those like plants of like your like you hear of musicians whose manager has commented on their TikTok and said you should make a song about X, and then they start making the song that they've already actually had in
Making this
production
all
the
the
whole time.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
But
I am not
like
that scammy. I don't have the energy to
no.
create that kind of thing. Oh, wow. Every time I hear about stuff like this, I'm like, wow, I don't know what the kids are doing.
I have a feeling that one with the how her it's like her and her husband going back and forth about movies and stuff that they watch. I have a feeling that was just something that they were doing for fun in the pandemic, and then the fact that she was an author has just kind of like come up a few times, and so maybe that's helped her book sales. I don't know, but it's kind of like because it's not promotional book content, it's very hard to make and like be like, okay, I'm gonna become famous on TikTok. Of like, how do you plan that?
Yeah. Especially since like it's a churn, right?
Yeah.
So and then you get addicted to the whole, the dopamine of like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this has gone like kind of viral. Well, now I need to create another one like that. And what I say, I call this like visual noise. Like it's just noise. And as much as like people are like, oh, you need to get on TikTok and put something up there, and I'm like, but what though? Like, I don't believe in creating content that's just noise. Like, I either want to start a conversation or I want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about my books. I want to talk about a theme or a topic that I'm writing about. I don't understand the point of just putting up a slick video that's done to a trendy sound.
Like
Um,
essentially a movie trailer, but a book, but for a book.
Yes, but it's
Yeah.
like the same one over and over and over again. And then it's like if you go to one of these classes on how to make TikTok for authors, and then they're telling you to do the exact same thing that this one other person went viral for. So now you're all making the same dumb video. Sorry. You're all making the same content. And what good does that do? Because now you're all making the same noise, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just that you just scroll by it. Nothing is really catching your eye. And also you're not teaching people anything about your books except for you kind of write a trope like this person over here, but y'all might be two totally different authors. And I just don't enjoy the constant creating of the content. That seems pointless, like without a
Mm.
goal. The way that they teach you to do it, it's literally like social media should be the end of your promo, not the beginning and the only. But that's the way for the last 10 years or so people have been taught. It's like, oh, this is your marketing. I'm like, no, it's not. That's not marketing. That's just promo. You're doing promo.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Um, I remember you saying at one point on it was either a meeting that we were in together in the Being Boss community, or it was on the Being Boss podcast, where you mentioned that for authors, once they've had like 10 books, it also starts a process of once you get a reader, then they're more likely to read multiple of your books. So you're able
Hmm.
to like get 2 sales for the like
Right.
one customer.
Right.
How has that changed for you since you've started writing more books?
Um, Actually, that part is still doing great. I sell books regardless of whether or not I talk about my books at all. I would like to sell more books. That it would help if I published more. I haven't published a book in a year. But burnout high. Uh, like my books sell themselves. I don't necessarily do a whole lot of promo for specific books. I do in my newsletter, I will, you know, put like a little, hey, if you haven't read or if you read such and such, because like you have them separated by lists or whatever. Like if you came here to read so and so, like so you like this trope, it's in this book, that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's still a lot of word of mouth, and that has done more work for me than anything else. Like people will come and be like, well, we never talk about your books here. I was like, yes, I am. I'm talking about my books. I'm just not talking about them in the same way that everyone else is.
Mm.
Um, but it also kind of that is kind of helping me position myself for the type of reader I want, and not necessarily like a one-off reader. I want a reader who's going to read everything I write, not someone who's just going to come
Mm.
here for this trope. Um, so yeah, like it's still back matter is still selling, like somebody buys a book and like, here's the next book in the series. Here's a book that's like this
Mm.
book. Here's a book that's in this world. And they'll just keep clicking all the way through. And that's the kind of marketing that's basically free. It doesn't do anything. All you have to do is just put it in there and add a link. And that's a lot of authors are skipping that. They're learning it now, but a lot of authors are skipping that, and they're instead spending a ton of time creating social media content.
Yeah. So what things are you doing to get people on your list? Is it like read the first chapter? Is it um learn about the behind the scenes? Like what are like the hooks that get people onto your email list?
Free short stories about characters I've already written.
That's cool.
Those are always good hooks. I do like a roundup at the end of the month of like all the things that I've written, and sometimes I'll include a little excerpt. And once I finish the book, then I'll put that in there. But for the most part, like excerpts, I found excerpts don't really work. Because they just want the book. They're like, when is this book coming out? Is there a pre-order link? If there's no pre-order link, I'm not going to remember. Um, but yeah, I think short stories are always the ones that work, or like epilogues or extended or side characters that people were interested in. Like if someone emails me more than 2 times about a side character, I'm like, okay, let me write a little something about these people and give it to them. And those type of things tend to work better than others. So still free content, free giving it away for free still works.
Yeah. It also kind of sounds like world building, like in a
Hmm.
way where like science fiction people do of like there are all the different ways that you can have the different things around, like say Star Wars, for example. Like
Yes,
there's the main core, like, is it 6 movies? And then there's all of the other
others.
ones,
Yeah.
like the Disney TV shows and the whatever that are like the
Hmm.
new stuff. But even before it was like, I'm sure there were like comic books and like book versions and all of those things. So it's just like world building that you do in a different way, which also means that by being on your email list, they get more than they could by just being like a consumer who reads all of your books. They can actually
Right.
like get more from you by being on your email list rather than it being like, I'm on an email list so I find out when a new book comes out. It's actually, I can get more in the meantime. So
Right. Right.
yeah, that's exciting. I love that. love that approach. Instead of like, how can I just like tell more people that I'm an author? It's like, how can I actually like make people care?
Because nobody cares.
Yeah.
And and like and it's always that kind of angle when someone is like, "Well, if you get on TikTok and do a dancey dance, no one's gonna notice because nobody's paying attention." I'm like, "Yeah, but I pay attention. I know I did that dumb little dancey dance, and I know it's out there. But if I'm giving away free content, that's different than." You know what I'm saying? Like I'm leaning on
Yeah.
my skills versus trying to pick up new skills that may not necessarily work. So, and I think that a lot more authors should lean on their more dominant skill. Like, I know that we are in a visual and video and audio world now. That's like the draw. But if you're a writer, you should write. And if you can figure out a way to do it, like there's an author that's in my group who does a podcast and like once a week. Yeah, once a week she has an episode, and then if she releases a book, she'll read the first 5 chapters of that book
Wow.
as episodes on her podcast. And I'm like, that's very brave. I'm not reading that filthy stuff I write. That's something I pay someone for. I just can't do that. And maybe I'll get over it eventually. But but it's like that's an excellent marketing idea, right? So,
Mm.
and her podcast has been going for what, like 2 years now, and she's seen a lot more interest in her books just by doing that. And that's not paid ads. That's not, you know, constantly creating images for a content churn. It's just her sharing what she already has, just in a different format. I think you have to get creative in a way that suits your skills and talents without you having to kind of like do things that feel uncomfortable, because it comes
Mm.
across inauthentic when you do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Um, and speaking on that of like the audio space, is that your books, are all of your books available as audiobooks?
Mm, they will be soon.
Cool.
I have two duets that are going into audio soon, and that'll
Cool.
be, yeah.
Sweet. So, how do you say the name of the app? Is it Scribed? Script?
Script,
Script?
script,
Cool.
script,
Yeah.
script,
Cool.
script.
Because yeah, I'm like, I don't know how to read this. Yeah, but what I really love about it is that it is, I mean, it's not voice acted, but there's voice actors who are doing the narration of the various perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
which I like. Rather than, you're having to pretend that one person's voice translates to all of the other different ones. But it's also
That
not
gets
like an
rough.
audio movie. Yeah.
Yeah, that gets rough. Like there's I love like the audio dramas that people are doing on podcasts now. That's like my favorite thing. Like I've listened to so many shows on podcasts. I really love that. I was like, if I had the money, I would totally do that. I don't even understand how it's done. Like every time I try to research it, I'm like, how do you fund this? Who do you pay? Who do you pay? How do you get the money? How do you get paid? Like it just seems like you pay a lot of money to get it done, and then there's no money coming in. No one has made me understand how you make money from this. It feels like a passion project, and I'm like, I don't have that much passion. Um, but like I've read some audiobooks, listened to some audiobooks where people have like one voice, and sometimes they can pull it off, and sometimes it's like, dude, you needed a woman to do this. Like the woman
Yeah.
needed to do the woman's voice.
And it also probably depends on how the book is written. Like, what kind of perspective is it written from? Is it first person? Is it third person? Is it like, does it change perspectives and stuff?
They're doing this new thing too with audio where even if it is two characters, like they'll have the woman in the man's point of view, like she'll do her dialogue versus him trying to make a lady's voice do the dialogue. And I was like, huh, I like that. I like that. Because sometimes these guys, the pitching, I'm like,
Yeah, no. It's like a bad impression.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, audio is where it's at. It's just so expensive. It's
Yeah.
really expensive to produce, and the ROI on it is very, very slow.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, it's possibly not everyone's ability to do it the first time around, but I can see how when you have a history of books that you're able to open it up to more readers, then
Yeah.
also then that makes like theoretically then the ROI is slightly better because you can go from one book to the next. Yeah, I really like that. Let's talk community things.
Hmm.
So when you started the original like challenge, it was just like a hashtag on Twitter, right? Tell
Yes.
us how that actually started.
Um, I think this was pretty. I think I was going through my first experience with burnout, and a couple of months had gone by, and I couldn't like I had a bunch of ideas, but I couldn't get anything to stick. And I was talking to a couple of entrepreneur friends that live near me, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll run a challenge, like a 5 day challenge for, like write 20,000 words for 5 days. And my friend Latoya looks at me and is just like, well, now you said it out loud. So on Monday morning, mind you, this is Sunday, on Monday morning, I want you to get up and like just, tweet about it, see what happens. So I did. I got up like before work, 5 o'clock in the morning, sent a tweet, did not look at Twitter for the rest of the day, came back home around 6 o'clock, and it was like 30 people. It was like, yes, I'll do this. How do we do it? I'm like, I don't know. I
I don't know.
just made it
I'm
up.
about to make it up.
I just
Yeah.
made it up. And like the first 2 cycles of it, we did it just on Twitter. And then people were like, well, we would like to have a place where we can get together to chat, in between challenges. So we tried Facebook, and Facebook didn't work. And then we eventually moved to Mighty Networks, which has been great.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. And is it so the hashtag, well, the original hashtag is 20K in 5 days, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily like romance specific back then.
No, it wasn't romance. It's still not romance specific, but I am a romance author. Most of the people who
Mm.
follow me are romance authors or romance readers. So my scope, it's starting to change a little bit. I've got a little bit of horror in there, a little bit of a couple people writing thrillers, which was really great to have them in the room this time around. It was so awesome. It's like, yes, new energy. But yeah, mostly romance authors, which makes it easy to have conversations. Like this last challenge we had in June, we were in there cutting up, and I think the only way that we could have gotten away with that is just because there was just a bunch of people in there writing sex scenes, because otherwise that's probably sexual harassment. But we had like it's a good time. Like by the third or fourth day, we all start getting a little bit punchy and jokey and stuff. So
Cool. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And so 20,000 words is is that half a book, part of a book? Like, do people start their books and then this gets them, like the challenge gets them partway through the book, or are people finishing their books with the challenge? Is it
all of
just
the above.
timing based?
All of the
Yeah.
above. 20,000 words is just kind of, I needed a gimmick, but it's really just about time, like sitting down and making time to write. And I've skewed away from like, the real output conversations and just talking about setting up a writing routine and getting in the habit of seeing like, when are you most productive? What do you need to do before? Blah, blah, blah. Just to help people create a writing ritual. But 20,000 words, it's like a short novella. It can be like the first third of a book. You can finish a book. You can outline a book. If it takes you 20,000 words to do that, it shouldn't. That's kind of mad, but
Maybe if you got carried away and started writing.
yeah. Unless you're like writing The Hobbit, like, because that's theoretically that was an outline for The Lord of the Rings, but you shouldn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long outline.
That's how he started it. Just as like, okay, I want to write this other story, but this is where it starts. And he just started writing about little short, hairy-feeted people. And that became its own story. But like every element that's in Lord of the Rings is built out of The Hobbit, if you've read it. But I mean, we read The Hobbit in school. We didn't read Lord of the Rings. I wish we did.
I have never read any of the books and I really need to. But of course, by the time I was old enough to really understand Lord of the Rings, the movies were out. So, and I'm from New Zealand, which is where they film them. And
it's so pretty.
Director is a Kiwi, and the guys who do all of the set design, that's like limiting it very much. But like all of the like costume design and all of the stuff, like Weta Workshop, that's New Zealand based. So there's like an extra part of it being woven into our culture, but then the books aren't Kiwi related.
No,
So,
they're not.
yeah,
No,
but
they're
I do
not.
own The Hobbit, and I believe my parents own all of his other books. But yeah, I do really do need to read them.
I mean, you
Um,
don't. You
well, I
don't.
could do the audiobooks.
You could.
I'm not gonna sit down and read that like
It's
hefty.
it's it's a
Yeah,
tome.
yeah.
I can't
Well,
believe I
many of
can't.
them.
Yes, many tomes, all of them. Even the
Could take me
outline
the
is a
rest of my
tome.
life. Yeah.
Even the Hobbit is that's supposed to be the outline. That is a tome. It's like 500 words. It's it's way too many words. It's way too many
Yeah.
words, and it's high fantasy, so it's kind of like a lot of it is just kind of wandering through the countryside, looking at stuff, and that's on the page. And I'm just kind of like, we could have skipped past all of this, friend. Where's the story
Yeah.
begin?
Yeah.
But yeah.
But then, I mean, it was written a while ago.
Well, this is still a tactic that people use.
Yeah.
Having edited fantasy, like sometimes I'm just kind of like, can we take like 3 of these paragraphs out? Like, are they necessary? Because it's just like it's almost it's not a genre convention, but it's kind of like a reader expectation, I think, for like this like deeply immersive, I don't know, lots of description. It's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's how people know so much about like the world of that thing is
Yeah.
because of some of that stuff, but a lot of it is like you can get a little bit lost with it. Yeah. So with the challenge, is it like the current one, is it that you everyone sits down to read? Is there any like writing, is there any sharing aspect or like collaboration pieces part of it,
I
or is
would
it
love there
kind
to
of
be
like
more collabs. I would love it to be more collabs. It is 5 days. I would love it to be more collaborative, like all of us kind of writing something together. That would be cool. I don't think it would ever work. Like as I was thinking about it, I was like, yeah, no, that's not gonna work. Too hard. But I do we do share quite a bit, like at the end of the, like we'll do 3 Pomodoro sprints, and then at the
Mhm.
end you have an option of talking about your work if you're having any problems with your work, or just sharing about your work. We had a couple of male romance authors in our group this last time, and like every time they would talk, we were like, oh, that is so cute. It was very much like, we have a guy in here. Let's make him feel comfortable. He didn't really have a cute story though. So yeah, like we share mostly people share their woes. We try not to do that too much because
Mhm.
writers can get in their feelings really easily, and then it's like, oh no, we've been talking about your horrible thing for hours now, and we don't want to do that. But yeah, sharing is part of it.
How do you split your time across all of the things? Because with the community, there is an element of hosting. Like, yes, you show up to write inside the challenge and outside the challenge. But you're also potentially hosting some of those Zoom times. There's like posts, whatever, to keep the community active. But then you need to like write your books, market your books, have some time for yourself, live your life, you know.
Okay, those last 2 things rarely ever happen. I mean, well, they're scheduled, like stridently scheduled. It's like, at the end of the quarter, I'm taking 2 weeks off and I'm going to do XYZ. But for the most part, uh, I have theme days. Like Mondays are just like today's. I work on blog posts or ideating blog posts or ideating for content for the community. Uh, Creating like just a list of affirmations and stuff I can share in there, um, writing prompts, that kind of stuff. All that gets done on Monday, and I just do it on a continuous basis, so I'm not like getting to the bottom of the file, like, oh no, I have no more writing prompts. Like I just made a habit of doing it all the time, so that I don't ever get behind. Where, Lord, just knock on wood. Um, and like, and I'm saying all this because like I was really sporadic with it last year and the year before, and like I was very, very overwhelmed, got very, very burned out around September of last year, and I was this close to like shutting it. Like I was like, you guys, I can't keep doing all this. I can't keep running all these write-ins. I can't keep creating all this content and running all these workshops. Like I am one person. And they promptly said, we're not going to let you close down. And now I only run one write-in a week. I run on Tuesdays with Tasha. um, and then I'm just left with all the other stuff, which is it feels a lot easier to handle now that I'm not holding space for so many people, because I didn't realize, I think until you do it, like until you run a community and everybody's kind of looking to you for, I don't know, just looking to you, period. Like you know things that they don't know, or they want to share things, or like even unintentionally, you're just holding information about their progress on a book, or their progress in, looking for an agent or editor or whatever. And it just becomes like overwhelming. So letting that go, and also like just being kind of detached from the everyday of them writing is really helped me be able to finish a lot of my stuff. If I hadn't done it, I don't think that I would have been able to come back to writing fiction. It's been really hard for me to write fiction lately, which is upsetting. But writing about writing has been going great, so I keep doing that, just to keep keep my pen moving, because I feel like once you stop altogether, it's easy just to stop. It's harder to get started again if you just stop. So I don't stop. I just shift my focus a little bit and try to do something else to keep my creative mind in operation. So how do I split my time? I don't. I just I have theme days, but like if I sit down to do something that day and it doesn't jive, then I'll be like, okay, I'll do something else.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. And also, so the other members of your community who facilitate, is that just, they are doing that as part of their own writing practice, or are they like employees or contractors of you?
No friend, no
Cool.
employees. I have one employee. But they're just moderating. They stepped up to moderate. There's 5 of them now. They all run different days. Some of them run 2 or 3 a day. And I'm like, that's all you, friend. If you want to run 3 write-ins and you have the time and space for it, go for it. I hope no one is expecting me to do that, because I'm not doing it,
Yeah.
But yeah, like some of them are really motivated. 2 of them are like, they're planning like an in-person write-in, and they were like, all you have to do is show up. I'm like, I'm in. So handing off some of that stuff has been really great. And the people that I've handed it off to, I feel comfortable with the level of involvement they're exhibiting. Like they're not trying to like run off with the company or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. And I think too, there could have been an opportunity at some point where you could have decided that the community was going to be your main thing.
Mm-hmm.
And instead it's something that you do as part of your business, but you don't let it take over everything else. And so therefore it can feed you in that way, and it can be that like creative outlet and inlet and all of those things without it just like taking over all of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been really easy. It would have been really easy, because especially when it started making really good money, I was like, oh, I can just not do anything. This is my job now. And then I was like, oh, wait, I just made a job for myself when I quit my job. What am I doing? What am I doing?
Yes.
I don't want a job. I don't want a job. I was like, I don't want to
Yep.
be in charge.
I think the thing too is like I'm so drawn to community, and I need to have my human design read at some point and figure that all piece out just to like reflect on it. But I do know that like my space or whatever is, I think they call it like the kitchen, but it's kind of like the community space, like the art room or whatever, where
Mm-hmm.
everyone comes together around a table and kind of does things. But for me, with like time zones, because I'm based in New Zealand, how to do the community things, it's like how would I do that? And then also it would be so time consuming that it would actually have to be my main income source, because how and when would I have client meetings, because now all my time is taken up by live calls and stuff. But then I don't really want to just have like what is essentially a chat room where there's no like face to face. So it's like, so then I just don't do it. Which may be a good thing, maybe not be a good thing.
I feel like there's different community styles, and I think a lot of
Right.
times in the entrepreneur world, we have one idea of how communities are run, and it's really just kind of lots of FaceTime. And that's how it started off. It's like, you're going to see my face all the time. And then I realized, like, oh, no, 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 this is too much FaceTime. I don't even want to see my face. Like, how are y'all still wanting to see my face every day, Monday through Friday? Are you serious? So like, I think that having, like, starting the way that you want to go, like, if you want it to be a community where they are spending more time with each other and interacting with each other, then you start it that way. If you want it to be FaceTime and everybody looking to you as the guru, which I don't know why anybody would do that, wild behavior, but I mean, that's an option. Or like some split of it, like, we do quarterly things and I run the quarterly things, and that's primarily, like, so that people can see me as like, oh yeah, she's still here.
Yeah.
But um but like for day to day, I don't think that it really requires, I don't think a community requires as much nurturing and like hands-on as people think. Like, that high touch thing is what stresses us out all out and what burns us out,
Yeah.
because you can't do that every day all day.
Yeah, I'd be like just completely a puddle of brain mush by the
Yeah,
end of it,
I
quite frankly.
experienced that, like, literally felt like my
Yeah.
brain was leaking out of my ears. Like, I'd lay on the pillow, I'm like, oh, there's my brain matter.
Yeah. So what I found is like having that middle ground of like, okay, well now when I'm doing strategies with a client, it is a collaborative process that we do while we're in like on Zoom or whatever.
I love that.
Rather than like we have a meeting, but then I write something. It's kind of like I still create a document at the end, but I spend a lot more time with them and it's more collaborative, which then means that they are more bought in on the process and we're able to have more back and forth. But it doesn't need to be like a group coaching situation, because then you end up with situations where like sometimes stuff isn't quite relevant or people end up being swayed by what somebody else is doing in their business. And so
Mhm.
while group coaching is something that I could feel like could be an option of like having it so that it's more affordable for people to work with me, but that I still get paid for my time, but I haven't quite figured out a way to do it where people don't just get like FOMO of how each other markets their business and all start marketing their business the same.
Yeah. And that happens regardless to what type of coaching it is. Like, like, even like in the little small group, like, critiques that we do, over time I start to see, like, oh, y'all are all writing the same things. That's cute. And then like when I pointed out, they're like, oh wow, we are. I'm like, no, it's not, oh wow. Like,
It is a bad thing.
it's a bad thing. This is not a
Yeah.
hive mind. We are here to learn how
Yeah.
to do our things, not to learn how to do their things.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, I guess it's kind of human nature too, and kind of how information sharing has become now. Like, people don't really, because they don't really know themselves, or what they want or how they want to talk about the thing they want to do. It's very easy for them to sit in a room and be like, here's someone who can articulate what they want, and then be like, oh, I'm going to do exactly like she does it, and then see how it works, and it never does because it's not you. um
Yeah.
I don't know how you, that's good luck.
Haven't figured it out, so therefore nothing exists yet, because until I figure out how it's going to work, I don't really want to set myself up for failure. If you're watching the video version of this, you can see I'm being like attacked by the sun, but it's okay.
Yes, like,
Um
in shadow,
I'm
it's
I'm
very
glowing. My jawline is glowing particularly. Yeah, but like the thing is, your points of inspiration start to overlap with the people that you surround yourself with. And so like even when I'm creating content, I do need to, step away and write some notes on my own and then come back and reflect on them and have conversations with people, but then reflect on those conversations by myself.
Mhm.
Because just because somebody else has suggested something does not mean it's how I want to do it, or um that 100 people feel the same way or whatever. And so like having that mix is so important. But yeah, I can see how that works. With this whole business space, often we end up talking about like how to make more money. So there is that piece of like, theoretically you could be trying to grow your community to be like 1,000 members or
Mhm.
5,000 members or something, paid members, and that's how you're going to like scale your business with very little effort. How do you approach like business growth and money in that way?
I am not really concerned with growth. It's really weird to say that out loud. I really don't care about growth. Like I don't care about growth. I don't care about churn. Like people are always like, oh no, so many people left my group. I'm like, okay, so they did, and a lot of times when people leave, they'll send me like this long message, like I'm having all of these troubles and blah, blah, blah. Like, girl, you can leave. It's fine. It's not an airport. You don't have to announce your
Yeah.
departure. um
And also you can come back if
You
that
can always
changes,
come
but
back,
like
and that's
it's
literally
fine.
what I tell them. Is like, if things change, we're always here when you're ready to come back. And I think by not being super concerned with growth, I have seen growth in a way that feels more comfortable for me. I don't like whenever I think about, I'm just getting goosebumps now. Like whenever I think about like thousands of people coming in at the same time, like I want to vomit.
Yeah.
And not because it's like, oh no, I have to deal with all these new members. It's just like the responsibility of that many, holding space for that many people and making sure that everybody is having good interactions. Like the more people you have in the group, the more that becomes an issue. So no, I'm not really concerned with growth. I will create workshops that eventually I will probably sell outside of the group. I've got enough now to sell outside of the group, like it's like one-off packages. But no, growth is growth as it happens. I don't. That seems like a very bad business statement to say. I don't know. I just don't. I don't care about growth in that way, because like if I need money, I can always be like, okay, let me open my editing books and get some more clients. Um, I have other talents. I besides like just bringing people to me, which is an overwhelming thing. Like I know people say, "Oh, Leos love to be the center of attention." It's not great.
That is the one thing about like star signs and human design and everything, is it's not always 100%
Yeah, it's not
accurate,
always
because
100%.
it's literally just like the day you were born. And
Yeah,
like your life happenings
experiences.
and experiences have changed a lot of who you are and what you do and all of the things. Like I would be a completely different person if something different had happened when I was 18. I did take a career quiz last week or the week before, and what was hilarious was that the answers that it gave me were marketing manager and event manager. And guess what I went to school for?
Event
Event
management.
management. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
that was on point.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yes, I've found that so hilarious. Out of this, like, 16 questions, I'm like, how do you? That's
How did,
weird. Um, but yeah, basically, I wanted to be like, manage festivals or whatever.
that would
And
have been
then
cool.
the one teacher that we had who was actually still working in event management was like, it's a lot of long hours and all of these things. And I was like, yeah, I think, but before that point, I had already picked up marketing as like this isn't really challenging me. We didn't plan a single event the entire time. It was all theoretical. So I picked up marketing as something to like challenge me, which is good because that's where I've ended up. And with something like the pandemic, I was like, well, I'm really glad that I didn't go into events,
Yeah,
because now I'm happy
your
about it.
business is dying, and people are still trying to recover from that. Yeah, but like the I think a lot of the time we have like this idea of what we want to do or who we will be. I always knew I was going to be a writer, but and like my mom will say this, she was like, yeah, you've always written, like you would write little books and stuff when you were like 6 and staple them together with construction paper and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, I was always going to be a writer, but y'all convinced me that it didn't make any money. So I went for school. I went to school for something that made money. And then eventually after I made money, I was like, hey, that's not all that great either. I would just like to do something I like to do every day and be able to talk to people about the thing I like to talk about. Like whenever I think about the fact that majority of my time is spent reading books, writing books, and talking about reading and writing books, like the 13-year-old Tasha is very happy about that. You know?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing about growth, is that sometimes you can end up in a situation where, yes, your business has grown, your business has scaled, your revenue is a lot higher, but your day to day is now not actually what you potentially want.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I know what I want to do in my day to day, and it's just figuring out everything else. And also, I'm not really driven by like money or fame. So, how can
Me
I
neither.
do the things that Like, how can I have conversations like this still, but not in a way where I'm like focused on how many views that it gets or whatever. It's just about like, which then leads the decisions of who I invite and how I promote it and all of these things, so that it ends up in a way where I want it to, so that I don't become like the owner of a podcast network or something, which just sounds so uninteresting to me beyond the point of the strategizing, because obviously that's the piece I find interesting. And then beyond that, like the day to day of running that, I would be like, no,
That somebody
I'm
else
out of here.
do.
Bye.
Get somebody else
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm at too. It's like, you know, could I grow this community to the point where it's like something that has thousands of people in it, and like we're running events and stuff like that? I'm like, yeah, sure. But then that would be my day to day, and I wouldn't get to read a book or write a book or talk about reading and writing books. I would talk about people who are reading and writing books versus me doing it myself.
Yeah.
And part of the thing that I wanted, like part of the reason why I had to take a break from editing too, was because like I was like, I quit my job so I could write more, and I haven't written more. It's like none of this makes sense if I'm not doing the thing that I'm not working a traditional day job to do.
Yeah. That makes so much more sense. Yeah. I love that. Let's wrap it up with some quick fire.
Okay.
So who inspires you in business?
This is gonna be really trite, but yes, Emily Thompson. Like I getting to know that little weirdo has been like the highlight of like being in that community, and just seeing her transition from, you know, like a really thriving online business to a brick and mortar business, and how excited she is about that. It's a really a gift to know somebody who is that smart about business, and also just really laid back about it, doesn't care about sharing everything that she knows, will volunteer things she knows. um yeah, Emily.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. A couple of other people have mentioned her, but if anyone has missed that, that's Emily of Being Boss and Almanac Supply Co. If you want to go
Yes.
check her out. What creative pursuit are you enjoying or feeling drawn to right now in your work or personal life? And it can
Hmm.
be writing.
It is writing, but also kind of like I'm really into this writing about writing. Like I know it's really goofy, just like all of a sudden I'm concerned about SEO, but like I'm excited about the data that's coming out of it now. So I'm just like, ooh, okay, that like I'm doing this right, which is weird because I was very resistant to learning SEO before. I was like, this sounds too businessy. I don't want to do it. Because I am a writer. I am not a business person, but apparently I'm both. Um, so that's been fun. That's really like been sparking joy lately. And pulling back from social media has been sparking joy. I've suddenly discovered that my friends are still on my phone, just not on social media. Like we can text each other, we can talk to each other on FaceTime. So that's, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. No, I love that. What is your favorite place on the internet right now?
I'm gonna say Pinterest again.
Ooh, I like that.
I like I used to be really into Pinterest like when it first started, like when there was only like a couple of thousand users. And you know, I got into the habit of only using it like for recipes and stuff like that. But now like my boards are growing again. It's like, ooh, I want to redo this. I guess too because I'm at home all the time now. It's like, ooh, all of these home projects. I want to, you know, like do all these things. And traveling, like those boards are spilling over again. So yeah, Pinterest. Because it's just Pinterest. I don't have to, there's no numbers attached to it. I don't have to interact with anybody.
Yeah, I love Pinterest as like it's the one thing that kind of comes under the social media umbrella that you can go to and really not interact with other people, but really just like curate a fun thing for yourself and it
Mm-hmm.
not be about comments and all of
Likes
the
and
other things and
shares and
numbers and
mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like maybe if you're approaching it from a business sense of like how can I share my content onto Pinterest, it could be, but you can also just make a board about veggie gardens and that's fun too. That's what I like doing. Yep. What are you looking forward to the most in the next year of business?
Writing, publishing more books. Also doing more in-person stuff. I'm going to do my second book signing at the beginning of August, and I did one back in March. And it was the first time that I'd done them probably in like 5 or 6 years, because I don't know, I got kind of disenchanted with greater romance landia and the energy that was there. But I found a couple of like small ones that are more intimate, and you get to talk to the readers more. And, it's just like a bunch of authors that I kind of love anyway, that like I'm glad I know offline now. So yeah, more in-person stuff probably.
That's so exciting. I love that. And also that you were doing a book signing without it being like part of like a big thing. It's just like, this is a book signing and the people that love me will come for all of my books.
Yeah. I know that people, there are still the bigger signings. Like they just had like the big book bonanza thing that's run by Colleen Hoover, and like people sell hundreds of books there. And like, I'm just not that big convention person. My anxiety is not set up for meeting hundreds of new people a day. Like I would just turn into a puddle and just be under the table. But this is like 2 hours, maybe 50 to 100 people come in. We have some mimosas. This one's going to be in Charleston. The last one was in New Orleans. Like if you can take me to cities that I love and I can have a drink and meet people and talk about my books and talk about my friends' books, then, that's a good time for me. That's a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. Not the like trade show equivalent of like.
No.
Hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah. Or like at least it feeling like hundreds of thousands. What are you looking forward to the most in the offline world in the next year?
Me and a friend of mine are trying to plan a trip to Cartagena next year.
Mm-hmm. That's fun.
Yeah, and I haven't been out of country since the, beginning of pandemic. I haven't taken a flight longer than 5 hours. So I'm kind of, there's a little bit of anxiety there, but I'm excited. Like we wanted to go to Colombia, and like she's always super chill to travel with. So I'm excited to start traveling again, like just to kind of break the seal and like do it again, because I'm tired of the United States. This place is not great.
You need a break every once in a while,
Yeah.
So the big question, if someone is listening to this episode and they want to grow their own business, what is the one thing you recommend they do or evaluate next?
Evaluate what you consider success to be for you.
Amazing. Oh, I'm going to journal so many pages on that.
Like, what is success for you? Because a lot of times when we get involved, especially we're in the market research phase of, starting our business, we're looking at all of our peers and people doing the things that we want to do. And we're like, oh, I want to be just like her. I want to do this like her. I want to do that. And then you start doing like, ooh, I hate it. And then you're starting from scratch and you end up emulating someone else. I think oh God, we're about the being boss catchphrase. I felt it coming. But no, I feel like if people took a lot more time to figure out what their values were, then they would know how success would look to them, because then they wouldn't be compromising themselves. Just like we were talking about earlier, like, if you're looking at your numbers and that is what's motivating you, that changes who you invite on your show, what type of conversations you have. And if that is not like, you don't care about talking about things you want to talk about, fine. But like, if you want to keep these conversations fruitful for you and enjoyable for you and for the listenership that you built, that changes how success looks. That changes how you grow. So, yeah.
Yeah. And what does success look like for you? Not the things that you have been told throughout your life by teachers, parents, family members, friends, as to what your business or your life should look like. Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was amazing to talk about all of the different things that you do and how you do it all and how you prioritize things and what you don't care about at all.
I don't care about lots of stuff.
I love it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Hive Podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend or on Instagram and tag me at Honeypot Digital. To find out more about Honeypot Digital and the work I do, or to find more episodes of the podcast and handy tips for small businesses marketing online, head to honeypotdigital.com.